commencing the session. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining today. We're very excited to have Greg Van Alstyne and Peter Scott from OCAD. This is our Systems Thinking Ontario crossover. So Systems Thinking Ontario meets monthly, roughly in person, and we're really excited to host the sessions today. There's this talk and then the paper talks for David, Zaid and Summer's paper talks following this session in another Zoom room. So we'll give you instructions of how to get to that at the end of this session. But yeah, really grateful as an Australian here to be able to join your Ontario Systems Thinking session today. So the topic today is tracing sLab's journey and reinvigoration for the systemic design community. And yeah, really excited for this session to be bridging the Pacific. So I'm Tim Thompson from a systemic design consultancy called Snowmelt, and I've been an art guide this year. And given the global nature of RSD 14, many of us live and work on the traditional lands and waters of Indigenous peoples. Very grateful for their stewardship of the land and waters and appreciate the continued participation of many Indigenous practitioners, authors, facilitators, and presenters in systemic design. For more information about the land you live and work on, we encourage you to check out native-land.ca. In Australia, we also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet and pay respects to elders past and present. And we will remind you that this session is recorded. We've just presumed the recordings of this will be available online in the conference platform and later in the proceedings of the conference. So the structure of this session will be a talk and a Q&A hosted by Zaid Khan, who's on the call as well, also a member of Systems Thinking Ontario. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat as we go, and Zaid will refer to those there as well. So without further ado, thank you very much for allowing us to join today. I'll pass to Zaid.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate the intro. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to have Systems Thinking Ontario crossover. We typically get together once a month, and more often than not, it's in person, although sometimes we're online. But it's nice to have the Pacific time zone overlap so folks can kind of see what we do in a virtual setting. And also there's a lot of relationships between the Canada and the Australian crew as well. So both in terms of our broader societal context and our interest in systemic design. So wonderful to be connected that way. This is actually the 136th meeting. So we've been running since 2012. As Tim mentioned, my name is Zaid Khan. I'm one of the co-organizers of Systems Thinking Ontario in the last few years. I do that alongside David, who's also here in the room. But typically we go around. When we get together in a room, we have the chairs in a circle. We have two co-discussants, 2 or 3, and it's pretty organic, just a conversation about different aspects of systems thinking. Sometimes it doesn't have to be nose on the head. Sometimes it can be through other topics, etc. So with this session, Greg, Peter, David, and myself have a workshop coming up on part of RSD. And I'm going to let Greg and Peter talk about that and what that entails. But there is a lab here at OCAD University called the sLab, and it's been a fundamental force in the community for over a decade. And what we're going to do in this issue of Systems Thinking Ontario is just get a little bit about the behind the scenes, or as much as you want to share, Greg, about the sLab, really tracing its journey, as we said, and just hearing a little bit about where are we now and where was sLab then, and what opportunities does it present in the new context that we're in. So we won't go around the virtual room, so to speak, just because we have a shorter amount of time. So Greg and Peter, we do want to land a little bit before 7:30 Eastern time so that we can transition. But why don't I kick us off, Greg, and maybe or why don't you have, Greg, why don't you introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your role? Peter, you do the same thing, and then I'll kick us off with the first question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming. And I apologize, I was a little bit late and I didn't mean to do that. When I say we, I guess I think of sLab as a we from the very beginning. It was co-founded by 3 folks in the early days of the tabletop building. So when you think of OCAD as that structure, you can imagine that it was a heady moment of creating a research program that to go with the relaunch of the entire institution, new floor plate, new a double cohort of students arriving in the undergrad level. But it's also the beginning of funding and bigger ideas and strategy for research. sLab wasn't the first thing to do that. It actually followed in the heels of something called the Beale Institution, or the Beale Institute, funded by Nancy Beale, and who was an OCAD alumna. And what was of great fortune to me is to meet, Lenore Richards at the time. She had a huge hand in the building of the building and the platform. For those who are part of the school, you might remember something called the Design and Humanity Statement, which was kind of an early formulation of sustainability logic. It really inspired me. I showed it to my think tank students at the beginning of every class. I'm sort of coloring in what was in the air. Literally, the building was in the air. I was attracted not just by the the ostentatiousness of that, the Will Alsop's architecture, but I did find there's something going on there. I gave a panel talk just a couple of days ago about the Institute Without Boundaries, and that's where I was just before this. So that was at Bruce Mau Design. We worked on a big project called Massive Change that produced a book with Phaidon and an exhibition that toured in the States and Canada and covered at the beginning a 20,000 square foot footprint. And it was about the power and promise of design, but it's also about the humility that's needed as we enter the 21st century, understanding living systems better, understanding not just eco-efficiency, let's say, but eco-effectiveness. That's how McDonough and Braungart put it back then. So those are some of the themes that were quite tangible. And I mentioned Think Tank, which was an undergrad course that has run here, probably still runs. It's a venerable course that a lot of us have taught. That's about social responsibility, design and problem solving, creative problem solving, a really incredible mix. And so I'd have to say that inspired me. It's inspired to the degree I tried to bring that into the foundation of the SFI program, the Strategic Foresight and Innovation Program. I can't say anything without sLab. I can't say anything about sLab without touching on that as well. That's how Peter and I met. That's how many of us met, through being grad students or teachers or people who came into the community through that orbit. And it was that program that clearly, in my view, became the OCAD node of the Systemic Design Research Network, which is the beginning of the SDA. And sLab proudly put Systemic Design Research Network as a constituent group, as a research group affiliated with sLab when we put it in our website. So maybe I'll just say a couple things more and pass it back. Lenore Richards, who was a dean just before I got to the school and then became not just a regular teacher, but someone with considerable course release to do. She was the director of research. She was the director of sLab at the beginning. I was the director of research, so I was kind of second in line. I tried to be her left hand or her right hand or something like that. We got to collaborate on many things. And Bob Logan, or Robert K. Logan, was a founder as well. I gave him the title chief scientist following the lead of Bill Buxton, who's another friend and colleague over many years. Principal researcher at Microsoft and a genius of many. I think he's a genius. He's a digital musician, pioneer of so many things. And I said, Bob, let's give you that title. We gave each other titles when we started, and we cast sLab as an open, as open as possible system, as a platform, as an interface between the grad program that was just a twinkle in our eyes at the time. sLab preceded SFI by about a year. It launched officially in fall of 2008. Grad program didn't take in students until about fall 2009. And so that puts us in a time and a place and a vibe, I guess. And maybe I shall just leave it there.
No, thank you for that background and context. So we can hear that the sLab is strongly entangled with SFI. One can't be understood fully without the other. And that is
Absolutely.
also where we understand you, Peter Scott, kind of come in to sLab. You're one of the earlier students of the program. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your entry into the sLab from the vantage point of an SFI student and onwards.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zaid, and I'm delighted to be on the discussion today. I'm Peter Scott. I've been kicking around OCAD for about 10 years now, and um, and I was one of the graduates from the Twinkle in the Eye program at SFI that Greg just coined. It's a twinkle in the eye indeed. I probably can best describe myself in three buckets. It is like the first bucket is the performing arts bucket, sort of contemporary modern dance and light and design. And the second bucket is business. And I spent a lot of years, 16 years at the Rotman School of Management and 6 years in executive program and 16 years altogether. So I've kind of drank a lot of Kool-Aid on executive education at Rotman and a number of other places, including MIT and Wharton School of Business and INSEAD. So, I've done a lot of exec program stuff, but I really cut my teeth on social innovation. I managed a small business program that was a community-driven program. While I was at Rotman doing my regular job, I did a community-driven program that pulled students from Regent Park and then pair them with world-class faculty professors at Rotman School, like a tier one professor like David Dunn, for example. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Or
He actually approved this program
oh, he did, yeah, exactly.
at
So
the SFI program. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
From me for
Yeah, and
OCAD
so
U.
yeah, exactly. And we can talk more about that as well, Greg. But I've kind of cut my teeth on this idea of sort of just social innovation, and then I checked into the SFI program, and shortly after leaving Rotman, I left Rotman. I left a full-time job and went back to school and did the SFI program, and I got the twinkle in the eye, to as Greg positioned it. And so I tend to look through a lens of integrative thinking, Roger Martin, business design, integrative thinking, and social innovation, but also not forgetting my background in terms of the creative sector. And so it's through those through lenses that I look through all the time in my creative practice. My research focuses on creative entrepreneurship here at OCAD University. I teach a number of courses in the entrepreneurship and social innovation minor here at OCAD, and and um, and it's exciting. It's exciting. It's challenging, but it's really really exciting in that I tend to think integratively. I tend to want to crash things up together, crash different ideas up together, but also making sense of them, and at the same time looking at practical ways of practical ways of solving wicked problems, frankly. And it doesn't have to be big, hairy, wicked problems. It could be simple problems that connect to wicked problems. Um, so yeah, so it's exciting for me in many ways to really look at just bringing my creative skills to bear in the business sector as well as in the education sector. So yeah, so I'll leave it there for now and put it back to you, Zayed.
Sure, yeah. And so maybe just a question for you both, Greg or Peter, like when you think back on some of your experiences with sLab, what were those big highlights or big points of attraction? I understand there were some design jams that you did. I understand you had some different client engagements. Maybe you can give the audience a sample or a tease of the flavor of sLab and what was really happening in those days.
That's a good example.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm sure we had worked before. Design Jam was a period and a kind of a flag to wave in a way. It was taking we borrowed the name directly from the founders running the movement. We sort of put it together with so instead of a two-word thing, I guess we tried to make a brand out of it for ourselves, not to take it away from them, but to try and offer it as a service. And so in some ways it was a service innovation where we were using OCE funds for Campus Linked Accelerator, CLA, at the time. So this was probably about 8 years ago to start with. And it was a 5-year program, and we got to participate in it the whole time. But what emotionally or professionally made the difference for me is that we could find price points to pay recent alumni or other collaborators who were in the orbit. So one thing it did, practically speaking, for me is help us find where those, when I say price points, it's not really the right word, but it's like, what would be a fair wage to make a sustainable ecosystem for people at different points in a learning journey? And I toyingly called one of the jobs a postmaster, because it's not a postdoc, because we don't deliver a doctorate at this point. When we do, maybe we can have postdocs. In fact, there are postdocs in the school coming from other programs. At the time, since we had and have this very successful master's program, we've noticed that many of the people I can see on the screen right now, for example, are in that category, and we're still in that boat. What we want to do is, how can we create sustainable reputation and revenue and impact possibilities for people over time? And what Design Jam allowed us to do is use a provincial objective of fueling entrepreneurship. Let's say the lore was, and still maybe is, but less so now, that the health of an economy can be measured by the number of startups, and young people are in a great position to be startup creators because they have everything to gain and nothing to lose, or something. I'm not sure what the logic is. I don't think it doesn't entirely hold up in an era since we've been through, let's say, 2 versions of the sharing economy, one which is more utopian or idealistic, and another which starts to reveal the kinds of extraction that can come out of that, the kind of like who's sharing and who's gaining questioning. So this passes through a number of years, so we can say from this perspective that there's a few things there. But Design Jam, which it's probably still online as a kind of shell, where Patrick Robinson, I was just speaking to today, he and I worked solidly on it. Stephen Davies, who's teaching in the program, teaching systems in the SFI program now, was the operations lead. And so one of the things that we were able to do is close, let's say, a contract with TMU, which was then Ryerson, to do sharing economy jam, not sharing jam. But Peter brought a couple of jams as a client as well, at least 2. Maybe you should say a word about those.
Yeah, exactly. And I did in my early days in the SFI program. I was a co-founder of a social enterprise with 2 other business partners, and so I brought them to the school. And that social enterprise is called Generation Connection.
Yeah.
So we went to Greg ambitiously in my second year at the SFI program and thought that we could do something to convene people. And I think one of the jams that Greg is alluding to is a design jam where we, in the early days of the internet, of doing collaborative convening people online, we were already, our social enterprise was already working in the north with Algoma University. And so we had been up there a couple of times to work with Algoma University, but also in collaboration with the Friendship Center of Ontario, which is an Indigenous center across Ontario, probably across Canada as well. And so we were doing workshop with them. So me being at OCAD, we thought we could do a conversation dialogue through the internet. The internet was bubbling up at the time. Collaboration was still emerging. And this was in 2015, 2016. And so we came up with this idea of having a conversation with OCAD University and Algoma University, and looking at these 2 communities and having a conversation online about some of the challenges and entrepreneurial opportunities that young people could experience, or young people could actually gain from. I think that theme came up from us through the idea that when you think about an urban center, often there's rural centers and there's urban centers, and often the resources are unevenly distributed depending on who you ask, depending on the resources as well. But when it comes to people like, say, jobs or say creative people, for example, often they have to go to a center. Often they have to go to a center to get a job. Um, and and I think that precipitated some of the reasoning behind creative entrepreneurship and so on. And so the event I thought went well. We had really good stories from the north and from the south, and some of them are very memorable. Um, I was looking at some of the pictures earlier today, Greg, from in preparation, and I couldn't
Yeah,
believe just how many people were there.
it's
And
packed.
it in fact, and there were some really wonderful stories that helped to share ideas and perspectives from North and South perspective that made people wonder and think out loud together about how we can continue the conversations around working together and collaborating together and rebuilding new types of communities to
Yeah.
support young people. Um,
Yeah, I just found a poster I could throw if there's a chat to put it in. And I probably have, I might be able to pick like one photo to, but I won't slow things down for that unless we want to.
No
I
worries.
didn't curate specific things, but I have them all.
Yeah, no worries. I think that was helpful, kind of insight in terms of what type of activities you were bringing together under the roof of sLab, and how, Peter, your interest in social innovation and social entrepreneurship connected to that. I was wondering, as we're coming across the half hour mark, I was just wondering, Greg and Peter, maybe you can offer some reflections, because part of this title is reinvigoration for the systemic
Yeah.
design. And Greg, you talked about how sLab was almost an early stage supporter of what would become the Systemic Design Association. Maybe you can give us a little bit of, I'll ask it more directly, which is like, what are the differences between where strategic design was then and where is it now? And how are you seeing that landscape shift? And what are your reflections on that?
Strategic design, systemic design, kind of, or both.
The broader category of systemic design, strategic design, foresight, innovation practices, the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
You've obviously started out in 2008, 2009, and now I can't do my math really quickly, but we're so many years later. So we'd love to hear about your then versus now reflections.
Yeah. Like some things that came clear over the last few years to me, I was realizing that design thinking is so well served by books and lore, and we can reach back to the earliest days of learning about IDEO or just the notion of design thinking. And I guess for me, massive change or working with the Institute Without Boundaries was part of it. And coming into OCAD and starting to teach it in a more conventional way, that project was an alternative design school inside a studio, and it understood the power of design and so on, and projected it into or saw it in all kinds of systems of exchange or economies, like material economies or image economies. And so that was the vocabulary or the abstract thinking I had at the time. Then we lucked out, I think, in the timing of the Strategic Foresight and Innovation Program was launched in 2009, as I said, and we can remember that there was a great recession fed by subprime loan meltdowns in the US, and Canada resisted the worst of that, I guess, because we have a more conservative banking sector. But it was a global and unfortunate and difficult time for a lot of people. The good news for higher education, or at least in our case, it seemed like we were in the right place at the right time for people who wanted to go back and learn more. And our, I don't want to say rhetoric, but our sort of intuition about what that might look like and how it might fit seemed to just continue to flow and grow in ways that I still feel good about. And that our program seemed to attract people who had tried other degrees and couldn't find what they wanted there. And that's perfect for OCAD because we're an alternative university. We're small for, in comparison to full-blown, many multi-faculty universities. And we had only become degree granting relatively recently before that. And graduate programs, as I said, started after I started here. So it was not even existing when I started in 2005. So if design thinking found us and we found design thinking at the right time, and then graduate students did that. On the other hand, once that was playing out for 10 years or more, it seemed pretty clear that a lot of the goals, a lot of the learning objectives have been pretty well saturated into the culture. And now here we are almost 20 years later. But we had a different ingredient, which was foresight or futures thinking, more applied in the case of the foresight word and maybe more scholarly, discursive, open to philosophical questions and things in the case of, say, future studies. But what the students told us, what I learned from them was, this is not a door opener, it's a differentiator. And I remembered that. I started to repeat it because it seemed like such an insight. And it makes sense. Like if you try to sell foresight to people that aren't on that page, aren't needing it, aren't understanding the discourse or being hungry for it, it's a tough sell and it doesn't go very well. If, on the other hand, they realize separate from you that they need something like that, and then they find you, it's an immediate spark because it's not that well distributed. It wasn't at the time, let's say. Now, oddly, as I teach in undergrad right now and bring the findings, the sort of insights from the grad program to, say, third years, it's pretty interesting because essentially, I'm not trying to sell them on foresight. I just reached out at the beginning of the semester literally and thought, what can I find to show them that's new? And it's like an insurance company based, or a reinsurance company based in France, in Paris. They put out a whole thing that's graphic. One section is graphic novel, another is possible futures, another is speculative design. And it was the exact thing that I needed because I was making an argument that this is now not that rare, and they can they can try it or they can ply it. They can, if they're not going to find a job in doing that 100% of the time, at least a lot of boutique agencies or maybe even big ones will be trying those techniques. And so the case I would make is that, and it's a good thing. Why? Because the pandemic has told us that we need to understand uncertainty, predictions, scenarios, bending the curve. All the language of the pandemic was, for me, a kind of proof that foresight not only is needed at the levels, not only is needed at, say, military industrial levels the way it was in the past, or even in social change levels, but across the board. And so now we have a condition where that's more easy to imagine, or it's even almost there in the background. So another question might be, well, are we there with systems thinking? Are we there with systemic design? And I guess you and I and some others, some of us convening this and convening the workshop, are thinking maybe we can do work in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Peter, do you want to pick up on that thought in terms of?
Yeah. There's so many strands that I could pick up on, and that you've mentioned, Greg. And one being that yes, I did, when I was at the Rotten School at the time, I did think of the Foresight program, SFI program, as an alternative, the new type of MBA program, if you will. And I still think there's still value in that, and I think I think when you think about organizations these days, one of the big things in organizations is that they have a mission and vision statement. And that mission and vision is something that it's sometimes it's parked on their website somewhere, it's not looked at, but it's extremely important. And I think that's where foresight comes in, and systems thinking comes in. It gives them the tools and a new type of knowledge to be able to envision that future, and to speculate about that future, when they otherwise did not have those types of malleable tools to do that in the past. And I think that, and so visioning is an important thing as human beings do. And foresight lends itself well to that. How do you bring ideas into reality? is really important exercise, I think, as a foresight practitioner. And I think that's the beauty and magic of foresight, is that how do you theoretically think of something and bring it into reality? It's not always easy to do, or even to understand the process of doing that. And I think that's the beauty of creativity, to be able to unpack that creative process, to be able to facilitate that process. I think foresight lends itself well to that. I mean, I think also to, and I think you're quite right, Greg, when you talk about coupling, we need to couple systems thinking with foresight practices as a way of thinking about the world and making sense of the world. And our socially constructed world is complex as it is, but how do we make sense of it? And I think systems thinking definitely have its worth and merit to continue to do that. I think one of the ways that I look at systems thinking is I like to think of it as a very practical way. And the couple of key words is communities. Communities is extremely important to me. I consider communities as nodes, important nodes in cities, important nodes in rural areas, and they represent an important part of how we can understand systems. If you think about our early human beings, for example, in Gregorian time, they were a community and they moved together. If you think about the industrial era, the factory was a unit, an important unit. And if you think about our modern times now, it's hard to put our hands on what is working as system, but I would put forth the consideration of groups of people, for example, like the creative class, for example, the creative class that Richard Florida writes about quite a bit. They themselves is a unit, is a system that exists today. There's something like 20 to 30% of our workforce is the creative class, and might even be more. But we need to look at systems like at intangible ways like that that has evolved over the years. Yeah.
I think that's a really nice bridge, Peter, to the idea of communities. And so Greg was talking about the ubiquity of design thinking over its time, and he even used the word saturation, right? And then you can also look at foresight practices. Yes, APF, you have other communities that have some value there. In terms of systemic design, here we are with the crossover in the spotlight of RSD and the SDA, Systemic Design Association. So maybe either Greg or Peter, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what your hope, maybe this is the last question before we bring in some of the audience and some Q&As. What do you have planned for the upcoming workshop at RSD as it relates to sLab? And what might you be thinking about the intersection between community building and systemic design at the local level?
Go for it,
Yeah.
Greg.
Okay, so when we started thinking, how can something happen that's at RSD 14 that is inviting for folks who may or may not feel that the discourse or the terminology or what we're doing is clear or open or inviting. I mean, I just think it's important to make a big tent, to be part of, to be welcoming, to be attractive. I mean, one thing about design is it knows how to make things attractive, or to find what's attractive in something. It's not about changing something. It's about bringing out what's there and what is possible. And so somehow when we were discussing what we needed or wanted, and I think, Zed, you said something that sounded like this, and then within a couple of rounds, we got to, where do systemic designers go to blank? Maybe at the beginning it was like, can sLab be the place where systemic designers go to do the thing they need to do? And maybe I think it might have been something like this where I think it was important to me to question, well, what are systemic designers trying to do? What do we have in common? And it's not as if it's not visible to me. Like right now, I guess I'm co-chairing and I'm co-curating the exhibition, and I get to look at all of the gigamaps that have come in the last year. It's a staggering amount of work, staggering variety of thinking, and it's so colorful and so thoughtful. And there are obviously things in common, but I actually don't know what's going on inside people's heads or hearts or guts. And that may sound strange, but that's how I'm teaching now. I'm talking to students. I'm saying, well, how do we make decisions? I'm saying it's a head, heart, gut thing, isn't it? Like it's not always one or the other. And so I was hoping we could run something that has breakout rooms, or I would like to be part of it, and to signal with the title, with everything that we put out, that I don't think I know, but I'm interested in hearing what other people are feeling, and to make a kind of an open space. Not, we're interested in, some of us have run open space conferences in the spirit of, how those are done. And I'd like to have a miniature version of that. I feel lucky that we got to do something that's a workshop that's not on the first day, because the first day is the first day. Like not everyone's here, and I wanted to be able to respond and react to what's already going on, like this session. So now we get to kind of not like we're going to throw the question out and start running the workshop. But for me, it's important to signal that I don't think I have the answers, but I'm really interested in finding out what other people are thinking at every moment. And I think that's what the sLab idea is as well, because we're at a pivot point. Like we've such a history of doing live in-person events that basically didn't happen during the pandemic. Rather than rushing into doing the same thing online, I just decided not to, because everyone was there. I didn't want more screen time, and I didn't feel the need to do more productions. I was grateful to be able to think differently. Now there's no loss of need for thinking about solving the poly crisis or anything like that. There's so much opportunity for bringing positivity, care, and smart thought and creativity to things together. And the question of what together looks like is really maybe one of the ones that I'm interested in. Like who is we? That's the question I'm asking. Who is we?
Yeah. Peter, Scott, can you maybe share some hopes and anticipations for where do systemic designers go to blank?
Yeah. And I was pleased that it left blank. Like doesn't mean blank dump but I think when we initially thought of this idea, I'm remembering that to pick up on your point, Greg, we don't often know what's going on in people's head, and so that blank space is an invitation. It's an invitation to unconference into the conversation, if you will. And so one of the things that we were thinking about was to even invite folks to bring in artifacts, an artifact that could represent some of the things that they're thinking about and some of the things that they're grappling with. And, this is a big world and there's a lot of complex things going on in the world, but there's also a lot of relevant things going on in the world that we can collaborate on. And it's extremely important for me. I can tell you that to talk about relevant things, relevant issues that we can solve, or at least try to solve together. That's really, really important to me. And so I'm selfish in that sense to say, where's the collaborative commons that you alluded to, Greg, that we can come together and unconference into the conversation. A lot of people, when they come and do things today at events, they're looking for meaning. They're looking to connect. And if there's no meaning making, then it might not be so fulfilling. It might not be so ritualistic that it needs to be. So yeah. So my thought is that we should we should unconference into these conversation and bring ourselves, our whole selves, and our guts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both. This is not the end of the session, but I have to, myself and David, although David, you probably a quicker jump over. I have a little changeover to make. So I'm going to step out, but please continue the conversation and I hope to see you all. in the next session. So continue, but I'm going to go prep for the next one. Thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So now we have an unconscious
I'm happy to step in with a moderating role here. Thank you, Greg and Peter, for all of your insights. We will hand to the floor if there are any questions from anyone coming up. Either drop them in the chat or just jump in. We're a small group. No need to raise your hand if you want to just jump in. Anna.
Oh, hello. My name is Anna Checkman. I am currently teaching, trying to teach systems thinking to third-year students at York University.
Wow.
Tough going. You know, they don't really understand why, you know, why I'm trying to just like introduce all the ideas and concepts and all this heavy theory, and I'm constantly having to, you know, sell it to them. So one of the things that I kind of like a metaphor I came up with was, you know, like in the beginning of the 20th century, like the avant-garde movement, you know, in like all the like Zurich cafes or something like that, and people just like exchanging ideas. And you know, I came up with this, and I like it because it has that kind of feel, right? Like we are a small group here. I really feel like we're the avant-garde. Like it just, you know, like it just feels like it, you know. I don't think I'm wrong, right? So yeah, we are I think systems thinking, you know, from this group that I try to attend as regularly as I can, and like all the conversations and you know, just the different things that come out of yeah, different conferences and things like that. I think we are the OG of something that's really gaining traction, and the complexity is not going away. It's just going to keep spinning out of control more and more. And we've got, you know, yeah, we're the avant-garde of what's going to happen. So I really feel like that, and I really believe in it. So that what kind of keeps me going, and I'm trying to, yeah, I'm trying to pass the message.
I
So
love that.
I really
That's
do believe that. So it's a compliment to all of us. We're all really, really cool. Yeah.
So when have you had moments when you got the answer to yourself, like apart from the avant-garde one, which I think works for me all day long, when you're working with the students, were there moments where it clicked and the students gave you a sense, or you just gave yourself a sense, oh, now we're landing?
Yeah. So we also, you know, I'm trying to find like I think in metaphors, so I'm always trying to find metaphors for them, and it's kind of hard because we have, even though, you know, I'm not that many generations after them, the Gen Z, but you know, I'm trying to find something in common culture. So, you know, I'm like, well, guys, have you seen The Matrix? You know, and they're like, yeah, okay, The Matrix, and I'm like, well, so I played a little clip where the child is bending the spoons, and he's like, don't try to bend the spoon. It's impossible. Just realize that there is no spoon. And then it's you that bends. So I'm trying to say, like, you know, like changing the perspective, like, you know, what we're trying to do with these ideas is bend yourselves, because, you know, the reality, all the layers of complexity, they're always going to be there. It's just the way you look at it changes. And so you can bend the spoon by bending yourself. And I think they get it. Like I kept saying, there is no spoon, like almost every week. And I think they get it. I think they get that, like, you know, like things as they appear to others and things as they appear to themselves, right? You know, that I assigned can't, but they didn't read it. So yeah. So we're going with Matrix, but I think they get it. I think they understand that, like, you know, like we cannot change reality or complexity, but we can change the way we look at it. So I think that really sank.
Wow.
Hopefully, we'll see by the end of the semester.
And I wish I was in your class. That sounds amazing.
Oh my gosh, you can be. We have 3 guest speaker slots, and I've been procrastinating. Tim, this is a real offer. Can you come? It's Mondays.
Let's talk. Okay. Yeah, something that stood out for me as well, Greg and Peter, I think that your reflection on, how do we unconference our way through this period. I think being a systems informed designer in Australia, just speaking to our condition at the moment, it's a really tough time. There's been, there's a lot of forces stacked against designers. Design research agencies that have been around for 15 years have kind of closed their doors. There's been kind of this jerk back into, efficiency, cost out, no innovation, no future orientation. But there's still pockets of amazing work happening, and those brilliant designers haven't disappeared. They're just, I think, changing their titles and taking roles inside organizations as, in operations roles or strategy roles or whatever it might be. And so there's this, we kind of feel like there's this movement of design going a little bit underground here, but it doesn't really take away the need for that solidarity and still connecting, I think, between practitioners to show that we're all still here and doing interesting things. But I'm not sure about what the conditions are like in Canada, but what do you think? I mean, given this history of systems, foresight, strategic innovation, where are the kind of bright spots for you, and where's the kind of the opportunity for something like a reinvigorated sLab to create that solidarity?
I can share one thought that I wanted to make sure to try and see what people think. What do we have uniquely here? I'm a tenured professor, which is quite a privilege. I mean, I can't even state what kind of job security that feels like. It's more than a French bureaucrat from 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I don't have a PhD on top of that. So I'm not bragging. I'm not, maybe I'm doing something like the opposite, slumming it or just, it's what I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel so lucky that I can indulge things that look like commercial or profit-seeking activity without needing to close the deal, because that's what Design Jam did. We modeled it as a service. We said there's shareholding in our stakes, or we have intellectual property and things like that. And for a long time, we were planning to make real on it. Probably I didn't dive in because I'm not trying to get away from the university. I guess I like the values basis here enough that I deal with the strengths and weaknesses in order to try to build the strengths and ferret out the weaknesses that I see. I feel lucky to be in the public sector for a bunch of different reasons. And universities can take a longer time view, and they're supposed to. And so now that they're under attack, literally in the country south of us, and maybe it's only a matter of time until that kind of thing starts happening more broadly, who knows? So one thing that sLab is going to do in the short term, if I'm part of it, which I plan to, is like specifically is to take advantage of being tied to being affiliated with a university, to be of. And strangely, I mean, another privilege, I own my own intellectual property. In a consultancy, it would be considered work for hire, or I'd be signing a contract. And unless I'm very good with contract law, is actually way more flexible than many of us know. I'm no lawyer. I don't profess any expertise, but I did learn that of all the branches of law, that's the most flexible one. So if you can negotiate your own permissions, rights, and IPs and all things, you can keep those, you can market them, you can traffic in them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a generalist, as a kind of committed generalist and interdisciplinary, diehard kind of curious person, I've tried to acquire enough knowledge or savoir-faire about certain arenas to trade in it and to try to use that luck, that privilege that I have to create platforming kind of possibilities for others, and to try to use as, I mean, I'm not professing that I have the best communitarian or reciprocity practices, but all these things matter to me. I mean, I'm trying to use the terms just to try and see if I'm doing it properly. And as I know more about Indigenous culture and as the professors that are here that have Indigenous backgrounds and heritage share curriculum and pedagogy with us, and I get to realize that the values basis that I've tried to learn from has very long roots, and like respect, reciprocity, relationship, and responsibility are the 4 poles in the medicine wheel that's part of a tool that was shared with us by Indigenous instructors. Now I'm teaching that in my classroom, and I'm not uncomfortable with it because I recognize design thinking and things like that in it. Lucy Kimball, who presented at RSD in Oslo, because I was there and I saw her on the stage, has a book, and I teach something from her book, and those 2 things superimpose very well. I guess what I'm trying to say is the values basis that that says something about the underlying purposes that are motivating me seems to be present among the students that I meet and the faculty that I like to work with and the colleagues. Like I don't know much about snowmelt, but I'm super happy to have snowmelt in my life now because the generosity that's been shown toward RSD, that's something. Like I've heard the snowmelt name almost every day or every meeting that I've been in, and I'm glad it reminds me that if you can run something and help another community or help something bigger than yourself while you're doing that, that's a great practice. And so I hope sLab can do things like that. And if I'm talking so much about it, again, I hope it's not just about it. It's a model. I guess it's a model that if we can get busy enough to want to work on governance, which is what I was doing when we were doing more, I knew that we needed a better governance model. Now we've sort of gotten smaller, and now we want to get bigger again, and that creates a new door for governing or being decentralized in a serious way, or any kind of things that people are interested in. I'd say there's interest in doing it right, and then doing that. What that means is kind of collective co-creative making the thing, making the organization, the network, and making the products. Yeah. Oh,
Thanks, Greg. There's many things I'd like to dive into there, but I'm very conscious of time. So the other session is starting right now. So if I know you're all from the same community library, so if you would like to jump across to the other call now, happy to continue the conversation here if you'd like, but I think it'd be great if we could support the others as well. So are you okay with all jumping across? I can drop the link in the chat here just to come back to the lobby. So you can just click back across there. Oh, sorry, that's gone to the wrong group.
Oh, yeah, but Greg, I wanted to just say in response to what you just said, I think you're absolutely right, and maybe it's, I don't know, if I were you, maybe it would be like my intuition guiding me, but university, I think, is it's a much better platform to get these ideas off the ground. And then when we talk to people in like commercial establishments or business people, just even casually introducing these ideas, I see everyone's eyes light up because for like management or business or enterprises, like the systems thinking is like a breath of fresh air because they already have like they're already kind of in everyday grind. And so we are developing these ideas, and then we will give them to the people who need them so they can feel like they have some oxygen in their work. So yeah, the university, the classic role of university is coming back again.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I don't want to take any of these things for granted. Like I find myself here, I don't feel driven to leave the sector. I don't want to take airtime if there's another session that people are going to, but I am always interested to learn who's looking for something similar? And I'm just answering a question that was in the chat from, where is it? Is it? Yeah, Dina said, as a current SFI student, can anyone join sLab? And I guess I'll just hit the button here. Anyone can connect with sLab to look together with others for alignments and shared aims. Like, that's the platform idea. I'm open to it. And so I happen to be kind of, actually, Peter is the director of research, Peter Jones. So if you know Peter Jones, he's, we're still allied, even though he's in Mexico now. And Peter Scott, who's here, is a kind of a research associate. And then there's maybe 10 other active people right at the moment, and dozens or scores who've been through. Sama, who was in the chat earlier, and many others. Well, I can be more specific. Like, when I add people to the website, whenever we get into something where there's a pretty clear exchange, it doesn't have to be cash or an RA ship, like a research assistantship. It doesn't have to be at a particular level. But when both people know that's what that is, then we sort of, it's like a kind of fellowship that works on that basis, which is not written down as a governance law, but it's an expression of affiliation. Like, other things I could say is that in looking for funds to do things with other people's money, which is kind of what I wanted, one of the things I want to do, I found that we did more contract work than grant work over time. Something like it was 2/3, and then it became even 3/4. So I asked myself, well, what's up with that? But I know, actually, I fully know. Grants, as I found it in the Canadian system, for someone like me who doesn't have a PhD and is somewhere in their research track and so on, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but you have to justify every cost. You have to tell a story, get the money. If you don't spend the money on the thing that you said, they don't seem to worry too much about that, which is odd. That's not how consulting works. Many of us have a consulting experience first. You have deliverables, you have accountability to the client and to the outcomes that the client wants. And if your higher outcomes and theirs are aligned, if your values aligned, then the work is better. Like, if you can find clients who want similar change in the world and than you do, then you just feel better about it. That can be done, not all the time. And with this lab, when we got contracts, we would behave a bit more like consultants. And if we had money left over, we could put it in the bank. So I happen to have, like, right now about 5,000, but I've actually spent it in a few different ways. I need to kind of pay it out. So maybe half of that is already committed. That's so little money left over. It's not like 250,000 or 2.5 million. It's 2,500. It's not a lot, but it's enough to start another thing. And it's unencumbered. I can spend it wherever I want. And if it was more, which it could be more, essentially you can keep what you don't spend if you're doing contracts, because the rules don't preclude it. I didn't mean to go into too much depth there, but I think it's important for someone like me operating in the university sector. Also, I found I could negotiate with the research office about what their overhead is, because if they're taking 40% or 30%, and then what are they doing for it? I can say, I don't want to do that work with you if you're going to take 40%. I'll do it for 30 this time. Next time we'll talk again. And it's not like I'm trying to be a jerk. I'm trying to say, like, well, how is that fair? But those things become real when it's when you're trying to operationalize and do more. But right now we're in a space where we have equipment and expertise, or we have equipment and patterns and things that we want to build on for capturing video, doing live events, or doing public events. Doing in-person events is really what I'm interested in. Participatory design, being in the room. It can be done like this, and I've done it, and students have done it probably better than I can. And so the thing that Peter and I were talking about was very hybrid. We've done more than that. North Jam was people in the room from the north and the south, and people in the other room from the north and the south, and both rooms connected in real time, talking for a very healthy long, like not a full day, but 3/4 of a day or something, with food in the middle.
Pretty much like a half a day, pretty much
right.
thing, like a 3 hour, 4 hour stint.
Yeah.
But if I could maybe pick up on a few points, I think in terms of where sLab could potentially go, it's good to hear some of your points, Greg, around just where you envision it, because you've seen the continuity of sLab and you have a sense of where it could go, and you're holding these potential directions in mind. I do see community, the word community again is an important word, virtually as well as in person as well. I think that's a really important word. There are communities within communities. Even here at OCAD, there are communities within communities, and and sub communities and so on. Um, I think for me, one of the things that helps to guide me is purpose. A sense of purpose, having a strong sense of purpose that will align my motivation with my practice. And often if I follow that gut again that you mentioned, that can be a really good guide and beacon. And so one of the things that I mentioned, I'm a co-founder of a social enterprise. It's not by accident that social enterprise is called Generation Connection. It's intentional because I'm thinking generationally, value-wise. So it's a long conversation, in other words. I think sLab is a long tail conversation. I think
And also generative design.
sorry, iterative design.
Generation,
Yeah,
generative.
right.
Generative design, absolutely. Generative design and iterative design as well. And so, but I want to just leave one last point. I think that a lot of innovation comes from the bottom up. And what that means is that on the margins, from the side, diagonal, there's ideas that are coming up from different angles. And if you look at, for example, American culture today, you can easily see icons that represents the identity of America. Louis Armstrong, Marilyn Monroe, the list goes on, like, JFK. You can even look at Jimi Hendrix. But what I'm trying to say is that culture and values, it's there as a way of appreciating it. It's there of a way of unleashing it. And here's the key word: liberation.
Yeah, right.
Liberation. That's really, really important when we talk about creating new systems. I think too often systems thinking can get bogged down with the theoretical practice, which is important. The theoretical practice marks it, and it just ossified. But culture unleashed it, and there's a liberative practice to be had when it comes to systems thinking, I think. And if we can unleash that liberation mindset when it comes to system, I think will be good for the generations to come.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, I really like that idea of the liberating practice of culture, because you certainly can feel in the systems communities that there is that the holding on to very specific ways of doing things, which limit the amount of engagement and participation that others can come who are just discovering the practices as well. I'm just conscious of time. Do we want to formally close this, or is there any final comments that anyone wants to make? Okay, well, thank you so much, Greg and Peter, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And really looking forward to meeting you in person next week.
Likewise, Tim. It's a pleasure, and nice to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Nice to meet you,
That's
Anna. Yeah, Dina.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for all your insights as well.
Grateful for.
Thanks, Dina.
See you at the
And
sLab.
Anna, if you can come to our workshop, that would be fantastic. It'd be great to have you there.
Love to see you.
Yeah.
It's Friday at 3:30, something like that.
Okay. I'll
Second last day.
yeah. Right now is a very busy time, but I'll try. I'll definitely